So that's Brian Stevenson. And I feel like he says it all so eloquently, so profoundly. And so I can just leave now. But I can't. I have something to say, something that comes out of 10 years of volunteering at Riverbend Maximum Security Institution, the Tennessee State Prison that, among other things, is where the death penalty is carried out in this state. Let me take you inside. Approaching the prison, I see open land, then a lot of razor wire, behind which are bare cement block windows with little in the way of windows. Driving up, I stop at the guard shack. I'm sure there's a more official, elegant way of framing that structure. Rolling down the car window to tell the officer my name, where I'm going, and for what reason. He checks his schedule to see that I'm on it, passes me through, and I drive around to the parking lot. I leave everything in my car except the clear plastic tote, the kind that you can take into an arena, with books or papers specifically related to the worship service or class that I'm doing, along with my volunteer badge and key. Walking into the building to what's called checkpoint, I deposit my coat, shoes, and tote bag into bins and put them on the belt to be screened, like going through TSA at the airport. Then I go to the book where I print my name, sign it, write in what I'm there for and what building it's in, and the time that I'm entering. I walk through a metal scanner and place my glasses on the counter because they will set off the next scanner. I have not worn a bra with an underwire because that will also set off the scanner and I'd be denied entry. And yet, because I present as female, prison policy is that I must wear a bra of some kind. Now, this scanner is a pole where I twirl 360 degrees, which, because I'm not particularly graceful, makes me feel like a 3-year-old toddler at a ballet recital. And then you have to raise each foot so the sole faces the pole. And then I go to another scanner that I stand on as it passes me in front of something with X-ray vision, and back again. I once made the mistake of asking the officer what she saw, and now I just try not to think about it. Then I can put my shoes on, my glasses, my coat, and they will stamp my left hand. Assuming that there's nothing questionable in my bag, shoes, or coat, and I've gotten pretty good at this, but rules change all the time, and sometimes there's a question. Then I leave the building and step outdoors to a series of gates that make me think of an airlock. The first gate opens and I step through. I wait for it to close and for the second gate to open. Then I walk to another building where I wait to be buzzed in. Once through that door, I give the officer my volunteer badge and put my left hand under the black light so that they can see the stamp. Then that officer buzzes me through a big metal door to a long corridor. At the end of the corridor is an exit to the outdoors, and I wait for an officer there to buzz me out. I want to note that at any point in this journey, an officer may be pleasant, even kind, and over the years I've come to count some of them as friends. But they may also be stone-faced, not even meeting my eyes, and making me wait what they deem to be an acceptable number of minutes to buzz open a door or otherwise let me through. This system can be as horrible in its way to those who work in it as it is to those who are incarcerated, and it takes a toll of its own. I worry for them. So now I'm out in the common area that's surrounded by the various housing units, those cement block buildings, the gym, the chapel, the library, and so on. And I walk to building number 11, where the chapel is. On the way, there's one more thing I always look for: an old black cat named creatively Blackie. He's been there since before I started going inside, so he's getting up there. He is spoiled rotten. Everyone feeds him, staff, the incarcerated, and he allows some of them to pet him. There are also a couple of very cute skunks who sometimes get petted, although I've not yet gotten close enough, but I will continue to try. Blackie stays outside, but there's a sheltered place where he has lots of blankets. He could leave, but why would he? Oddly enough, since he is, after all, a cat, I sometimes think of Blackie as the most evident sign of humanity in the whole damn place. Once in the chapel, I set up for the class or the worship service. I usually do this with my partner, Amy. It's good to do this work with another human being, especially a lovely one who brings music and meditation, among other gifts, to the wasteland. And the men start coming. Abu Ali, who until 2 years ago had spent more than 30 years on death row. John, a big guy, who doesn't necessarily want you to know what a sweetheart he can be, who had also been on death row. Dilo, who has an angelic smile and is vegan. Zoe, who is learning about yoga from Amy and now offers a class for the men. A whole bunch of young men in their 20s like BJ, Corey, Tony, Uno, and Kendrick, who carries a tiny dictionary with him so he can look up the words he doesn't understand. And there are older ones like Rock, Leverett, Jax, William, and Peru, who was a dentist in Peru. And Jasper, who supported Trump, and who has a wisdom and generosity of spirit that I wish I had. And Harold, who walks with a cane and always has something to say. He should be sitting on a porch somewhere holding court with the neighborhood. And I know that they love me. There's a simplicity in it because we see each other at most twice a week for a few hours. We don't know all the details of each other's lives because we live so far apart, both figuratively and physically. Further, I've been a religious professional long enough to know and appreciate appropriate boundaries, which protect us all. And yet, we are in deep relationship. In this place where everything is stripped away, what's left can have a purity to it. I'm not naive. I know there are men at Riverbend who are not the finest of people, although I still hold out hope. But the ones I know are fine. And it's because they've worked hard to be in that place. They are deeply flawed, of course, because they, like you and me, we're all human. They are usually guilty of the crimes they've been sentenced for, and they do not deny it. But I see in real time the truth of what Brian Stevenson means when he says that each of us is more than the worst thing we've ever done. So much more. The very first time I went to Riverbend before I became an official volunteer, so we're talking more than 10 years ago, I sat in a pew as men started arriving. The one who sat next to me was bald and tattooed over every part of his body that you could see. Was I a little nervous? Yes. And then he introduced himself shyly, turning his head to meet my eyes and tell me that what he looked like on the outside was not what he was on the inside. Something about him pierced my anxiety and deflated it a bit. Entirely? No. But I experienced in real time that maybe there was something more to the old adage about not judging a book by its cover. Something more than I had realized. Proximity. I visited someone who I was mentoring in what was then called the Take One program. He had been granted parole after almost 30 years of incarceration, and we were just waiting for his out date. But he had received some paperwork that morning indicating that there was one more class he had to take first, which was a surprise and would have delayed that out date. However, He got word a few hours later that it was a mistake, and he would indeed be leaving soon. He told me all of this with a smile. Now, if that had been me, I think I would have still been outraged and absolutely climbing the walls. I asked him how he could be so calm, even happy. And he reminded me that while in prison, he had learned to meditate. So, those of you who meditate, would you have been so serene after having just gone through a few hours of that kind of turmoil? I don't think I would be, but I learned that it can be done. Proximity. I picked up a man once who was released on parole after 26 years of incarceration, and that began when he was 18 years old. Standing on the other side of the gate, I watched him come out towing a big garbage can that contained all of his worldly goods. A big guy, he walked so lightly, more so than I had ever seen him walk before. We stowed his belongings in my trunk, and we blew that popsicle stand. He wanted to have Mexican food at Taco Bell. I will never in my life forget the huge grin on his face as he put that taco in his mouth and started to chew. There is such beauty in simple things. Proximity. There was a man who gave a homily some years ago and said, "I don't want to be rehabilitated. That means returning me to my former state. I want to be transformed." That's just one example of the humanity that so many of these men have come to know in themselves and to share with me. Proximity. You heard when I took you inside a few minutes ago how difficult it is to just do that, even when it's something you do regularly. Our criminal justice system, and I cringe at that oxymoron of a term, is set up elaborately to keep the incarcerated out of sight. We don't see them, we don't hear them, we don't know them. Most of the time, we don't want to. And that's our loss. Because they have so much to teach us if we are open to being changed. I believe with all my heart that I receive so much more than I give, and that I am a better human being for it. It's that proximity thing. Now that I know these men, there is no going back. And part of my mission, which I tell them all the time, and it makes them smile, part of that mission is to bring them outside the prison walls, as I am doing right now, bringing them to you. To push back against the system that tries to hide them from you, the system that works so hard to tell you that these men are dangerous, that you have nothing in common with them, that you're happier not knowing them, that they don't count. Because if we could all see them, we would know that's not true. Then the system would have to change. Eileen told us a story this morning about a poor girl who had something to tell people that they would value, if only they could see her. But they couldn't because she was poor and wore tattered clothing, and that made her invisible to them. So when a well-to-do woman lent her her fine cloak, people could see her and hear her. She was truth. And the well-to-do woman who gave her what she needed in order to be seen and heard was story. Kendrick and Jasper and Abu, Dilo, Jax, Zoe, Peru, John, all the rest. They are truth. And I am story. The late Desmond Tutu, the South African Anglican archbishop who chaired the Truth and Reconciliation Commission after the end of apartheid, said of the African concept of Ubuntu, "None of us comes into the world fully formed. We would not know how to think or walk or speak or behave as human beings unless we learned it from other human beings. We need other human beings in order to be human. I am because other people are." End quote. Quite simply, I am a better human because the human beings I know at Riverbend. I know just a little bit more about things like generosity, tenacity, curiosity, humility, power, and love than I did before. I am changed because of their willingness to share their humanity. As Wicked's Glinda the Good Witch sings in For Good, which Holling so beautifully gave us earlier this morning, "These men will always be with me like a handprint on my heart. I have been changed for good because I've known them. I've heard it said that people come into our lives for a reason, bringing something we must learn," as the lyric goes. And we are led to those who help us most to grow if we let them, and we help them in return. Well, I don't know if I believe that's true, but I know I'm who I am today because I knew you. Like a comet pulled from orbit as it passes the sun, like a stream that meets a boulder halfway through the wood. Who can say if I've been changed for the better? But because I knew you, I have been changed for good. Thank you for giving me the time to tell this story. I can only hope and wish that each of you may have such deeply meaningful experiences in your lives, and that you become storytellers. It's proximity. Please, let's all hear Brian Stevenson's grandmother and keep close. Blessed be, and amen.